Hi guys, welcome to season 2 of Tea with ALSA, where we sit down with inspiring individuals from different fields to discuss their journey to success, the individual habits they rely on, and the advice they have for an entrepreneurially minded audience. This season, we have an exciting lineup of guests, including accomplished entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and experts in their field. We'll be diving into their stories, uncovering the challenges they faced, and learning about the strategies they used to overcome them. So grab a cup of tea and join us as we explore the mindsets, habits, and strategies of those who have achieved success in business across various different industries. We hope that by listening to our guests, you'll be inspired to take your own journey to success, and that the advice and insights shared on the show will be valuable to you as you navigate your own entrepreneurial path. We're happy to kick off this new season and can't wait for you to join us on this exciting journey. Let's get started.
Got it.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Tea with ALSA. I'm so happy to be here with a very special guest. Her name is Egzona Makolli. Egzona is an industry nutritionist, founder of Life Fruit Supplements. Previously, Egzona has worked with some of the leading supplement brands in the world, where she formulated and launched some of the most used supplements in the industry. Egzona, without further ado, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Tea with ALSA.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be on the podcast.
And I want to move straight to the first question because, I'd say this industry is quite, it does hit home with me, and I'm personally quite passionate about nutrition and healthcare, but I won't be too selfish with the questions. I'll make sure that they're quite broad, but at the same time, hitting quite a few interesting and important points. So let's start with something more general, such as your childhood and pretty much early life. How would you describe your adolescence and back in your secondary schools, those years? Like, were you already passionate about nutrition back then? How did everything start?
So it's really bizarre because I always think nutrition was embedded in my DNA in a weird way, because I grew up in a typical Albanian household, enjoying burek, flea, and everything on a daily basis. Probably over enjoying it a bit too much, and I went from being a very active child to being quite overweight at the age of 14 to 15. And obviously being told to my face that I am overweight by every single Albanian family member that was there, which was a good thing because it opened my eyes to seeing that I was actually really overweight, but also unhealthy. But it wasn't until I actually went to see a healthcare professional, because I went from being this active child to being this overweight teenager who didn't move, just sat on the table, or not on the table, but on the sofa, watching TV, eating Ben and Jerry's ice cream. But the doctor basically said to me that if you continue, and she basically told me a list of certain conditions that I would have growing up, which were all related to the way I lived my life, which kind of opened my eyes. And then I lost weight dramatically within 3 months, which I would never recommend as a nutritionist, but I really believe that was my way of going into nutrition in my later adulthood life. I actually didn't fall into nutrition until my third degree, which everyone's like, you went into 3 different degrees in a matter of 2 years. I always wanted to be a scientist ever since I was a very young child. I remember we used to watch this cartoon, which was Dexter's Laboratory, and it was like whoever was born in the 1990s would know about it. And there was like this little geek who came up with all these different inventions. And I remember as a child, I would always try and come up with different inventions. And I would be like, I want to be a scientist. I want to be a scientist. But I didn't know in which field I wanted to be a scientist in, because science is broad. And I remember my first degree was radiography, where it's basically X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, obviously all of that. You do imagery. And I spent a year studying that, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I knew if someone was unwell, I knew it before anyone else, and it didn't sit right with me. I've always been a people's person, so I show a lot of emotions, but I couldn't know something and then see that person walk away. So I couldn't do it. And I remember after a year of studying it and passing through the first year, I sat with my parents and I was like, it's not for me. And they looked at me and they were like, okay, what's for you? And I was like, I don't know. And I remember mom saying, you don't know? Okay, so figure out. And they never kind of like pushed me to do a certain thing. And then I decided, let me try pharmaceutical science, because being a pharmacist in my obviously being a pharmacist sounds quite cool. Zero research behind it. All I knew is pharmacists prescribe medication. I went into pharmaceutical science, and the moment I started to learn organic chemistry, I came back home. I was like, "Mom, it's not for me." And she goes, "But I loved organic chemistry during my youth." And I was like, "But I don't." And then the next week, I bumped into one of my professors, who was this lovely lady. Her heritage was from Greece, and she grew up in New York. And I remember I sat down with her, and she said, "Tell me your story." And that's the first time I've ever told my story to someone on the spot. And then she goes, "Can I give you a book?" And I was like, "Okay, fine." She gave me a book about nutrition. And she goes, "You know that secretly you've always had it in your heart to study nutrition, but you've not known that." And I still have that
Wow.
book till this day. So I then took on a bachelor's in nutrition, and I've not looked back. And it's just opened my eyes to, obviously, the way I lost weight. Nutrition is not just weight loss at all, but the way I went about my life in terms of eating and living my life, and how I live and eat now is so different. And I think that it was embedded in my DNA to actually be a nutritionist, but I didn't know until I met this professor, and I've not looked back. Ever since then, I've kind of been fascinated about nutrition a bit too much sometimes, because it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But I believe that it's always been something it's been written for me to do. I think you fall into your path in life. It's never too late to go into the path that you're meant to follow. So I wasn't the typical, child where you grow up and you have to get a degree in that certain field because you started that degree. My parents didn't say finish it. They were like, if you don't like it, stop and do it again. Even though they ended up paying quite a lot, because obviously it's not cheap to pay for those
Yeah, no wonder.
2 years. But they still pushed me to do what I'm passionate about. Now they regret it because they can't eat as much burek as they used to, but they're happy with what I've done in my life so far.
Oh, wow, that's really amazing to hear, that instead of falling for that body shaming and feeling guilty about yourself back in your early years, somehow the events turned out to be quite constructive in the end, with some sort of epiphanic moment once you met this lady. Just one book apparently can change a life, and it's, well, in a way we have to feel grateful and quite thankful to this lady for actually making that pivoting moment and helping you follow your dream. And here you are today. But we want to explore more gradually where Life Roots is now, and where Egzona has come over the years, and that process. So what was the defining moment that led you into the world of business in particular? Like, when did you actually realize that, you know what, fair enough, now I know that nutrition is my passion, now nutrition is, let's say, the field that I want to become an expert on. Why should I become a business person instead of just providing services as an employee? Or what was that defining moment?
So it's quite interesting because I believe it's been a decade. It may have been 11 years, but it's been definitely a decade of me being a nutritionist. I started working for companies, as you do, because when you finish university, I didn't have the vision of I want to do my own thing at all. I just had the vision, let me get a 9-to-5 job, let me earn X, Y, Z, and just, I'll be happy in life, and I'll gradually progress into being more of a obviously better qualified nutritionist, a better role and things like that. I didn't even look into the actual monies that nutritionists earn, because they do not earn a lot unless you do your own thing.
Yeah.
But I remember I obviously my first job was 9-to-5. I hated it. I'm going to be totally honest. I hated it because for me, it wasn't my passion. I was doing it, and there was consultations for a Spanish company, and I hated it because they were focused on weight loss through supplements, which in my opinion didn't work. And it was kind of like a quick pyramid scheme business. Now it's out of business in the UK but that makes sense because it's not something which we believe in the UK, and especially in London. But it wasn't what I was passionate about. So then I went into another company after a few months there. And again, 9 to 5. But then I was learning about supplements. So this other company was basically, I was a nutritionist in dealing with clients who requested obviously supplementation to their dietary intake. But again, it was just working for an individual, working for a company, a corporate company. And I think that corporate company was actually brought out by Tesco, and then they ended up closing. I think I had this thing where I worked for companies and they closed, but it wasn't me. I can assure you, it wasn't me. But
Right.
then I actually was headhunted for a position with one of the leading distribution companies in the UK. And there I kind of got an insight into working with some of the leading brands in the world, like Garden of Life, which is a multi-billion-dollar company from America, Nature's Answer, Neo. So I managed to work with these companies and I got an insight into the companies, which I didn't in my previous roles. And through working in this company, I met a pharmacist, an individual who was buying these supplements from the company. And he sat down and he was literally, that's the second time someone's asked me about my biography on the spot, right? And then he was like, can you tell me a bit about yourself? And I thought it was a bit random. I was like, why? But then he was like, why have you never done your own thing? Because your knowledge is beyond where you're working.
So it's very similar to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All the moments are exactly the same in my life.
So this was like stage 2.
Exactly. I don't know if I have a stage 3 yet. Maybe I'll have to think about
Soon
it.
enough.
But stage 2, and he was literally, and then I told him my story, and he was like, let's do it. And I was like, okay. I literally said okay on the spot, and he goes, you do everything, you formulate, you do X, Y, Z. I will back you up in terms of ensuring that you have the connections and whatever. And I was like, fine. But then I flew out to LA 3 months later for the Expo West. And I remember being in LA and seeing all these brands and everything like that. And I was sitting down, I was actually with my sister, and I was like, I've got this vision of doing my own company. She was like, great, amazing. And then my mom was like, I love the idea. And she was like, but there was always a but, because she was like, but what if, because you won't have a stable income and things like that. And I was like, Mum, I want to do it. And then I was like to my dad, I want to do it. And my parents were like, do it. Amazing. Because they've always been the parents who have pushed me to achieve, as opposed to saying, just stay where you are because you're comfortable. And I remember I sat down and I was like to my sister, I can't come up with a name. And she was like, you'll get it. And I was like, but I really want to call it. And then she basically asked me, what is your passion in life? And I was like, my passion as a nutritionist is to educate individuals on the importance of life, the importance of consuming certain macro and micronutrients. We know a lot about macros because we're told about protein, fats, carbohydrates every single day, but we're not told about micronutrients and how essential they are in small amounts, hence the term micro. And then she told me, she was like, what's your idea? And my mum's parents grew up on a farm. They had a beautiful farm in Kosovo back in the 60s or 70s. And I remember saying to my sister Fiona, and I was like, I really, really would love to incorporate the knowledge that my grandparents had with botanicals into micronutrients. And then I was like, I want to call it life nutrition. And she was like, no, I wanted to call it roots actually. And then she asked me the definition of micronutrients, and I was like, micronutrients are essentials, vitamins and minerals which are needed in your roots. And she goes, life roots. And that was the moment which literally I knew that my brand would be called Life Roots. I formulated them and I started a business thinking, let me do a business plan. Well, I'm going to follow the business plan, 70 pages long. I don't know why I did 70 pages of a business plan. And I left my job 2 months before the pandemic hit. And my brand was launched January that year. I was in Paris with my family members, and my brother was really self-conscious about the pandemic and about COVID. And I was just playing it down. I was like, it's not going to be anything. And my brother goes,
I've got it sorted. My supplements.
I was literally like, it's fine
cute.
and nothing's going to happen, right? And then my brother goes, it's going to be a pandemic. I was like, don't say that. It's not going to be a pandemic. And then my brother goes, you just started a business. And he started laughing. I was like, great. 2 months later, lockdown. And then when Boris said that, it was quite funny because I had my business plan on my MacBook and I just binned it. And I was like, done. Let me just start afresh. Let me just keep it going. And to be fair, Life Roots has kind of like progressed from being kind of like really, really bootstrapped, because I started the company as a bootstrap company. I had the only help that I had is with obviously within the family members and within a few of my friends with which my brother introduced me to them. And I've really kept it family based because I didn't want to get investors on board. I didn't want to go for it to grow mass market instantly because you can only do what you can do in the beginning. And it's kind of gone from being a really, really, really new small company to being an okay company in London. It runs itself, and I still run the company. I put 100% as much as I can into the company. It's going okay so far. I'm happy with it, and it's my passion was to always use botanicals. Hence my grandparents' heritage of being on the farm, growing their own botanicals, and every single product is botanical based. The actual labels are basically food based. So I've tried to incorporate as much as I can from my family's history, from my life into the supplements, and to make them as beneficial that you can. Because I've always believed in supplementation when it's required, as opposed to if an individual needs therapeutic supplementation, that's a whole different matter of nutritional supplementation. Whereas this is for maintenance dose, so it's for every single individual who can use obviously a multivitamin or a digestive supplement in addition to their dietary intake.
Well, it does sound like you've had quite some journey, and of course it's been only 2 years, by what I gather, that you've been working on this project. And of course, for one, COVID was, let's say, the elephant in the room, but obviously we could see the elephant. It was definitely something that impacted all of us across all levels of society. Has there been any other obstacles along this journey of yours, like so far in these 2-3 years? And how have you managed to surpass them? Like, how have you dealt with, let's say, difficulties that have come up and tried to stop you from going further?
I think, I mean, COVID was the biggest, because when you do like a business plan, you don't plan for a pandemic. It sounds really bizarre, but you don't plan for a pandemic. And COVID was the biggest thing because a lot of my vision of LifeRoots was B2C through e-commerce platforms, so online selling, and then B2B through different retail platforms such as in-store, but it would primarily be in-store and then online basis when you can. But that kind of went out the window because in stores, apart from pharmacies, everything was closed for, I've actually forgotten that because it seems like it was a lifetime away when it was only, COVID was only less than 2 years ago. But it's one of the biggest issue would have been that in terms of marketing and obviously setting the strategy to where you would spend your social media budget and obviously Google ads and XYZ, that kind of went out the window because then everyone was focused on Google ads. So some of the biggest companies in the world were spending amounts that LifeRoots could not afford at all, and let alone to get up there to their level because they're already known. So that was the biggest kind of like, I would say, hiccup that happened. But how I overcame is I basically targeted individuals through marketing such as emails, and whereas I had my base of consumers and they kept with me because I'd rather have consumers who stick with the brand as opposed to consumers who just want to test it and then buy another brand. So I kind of invested more time into that. I invested more time into doing more blogs and educating individuals and just word of mouth, because word of mouth really helps, especially in the London circle. So I invested more time into that as opposed to spending all the marketing budget within a crazy period of time, which wouldn't have worked out at all. It would have just ensured that LifeRoots wouldn't have had that marketing budget for the foreseeable future. So that was the biggest hiccup, I would say. But fast forward to now, retail has reopened, and it's reopened with a vengeance, because a lot of people thought that retail would be gone after the pandemic, but it's actually came back, and retail is stronger than it used to be, in my opinion. And if I look at figures of certain brands and XYZ, then retail has actually came back with a vengeance, because I think we're kind of bored of just getting everything online and not being able to feel, touch, and actually see, because we're humans. We need that human interaction, right? So I think that was the biggest hiccup I faced so far. But as I said, it's still standing, it's still working well, and I'm super happy that it is, because I know a lot of really reputable businesses went bust during the pandemic. And whilst I questioned, I remember reading about a lot of them, and I was like, wow, they're going bust. I'm like literally nobody compared to them. But life was still running, and it was still keeping itself afloat without any sort of financial input for myself, anything like that. So yeah.
It's quite impressive the way that you've just managed to keep up with all the difficulties. And again, as you said, COVID has just been quite a wreck for everyone. And it seems that you've also managed to handle quite well in terms of the competition side. Like, it's not that you've been shaken by that intimidation of big brands that were already existing pre-COVID. Are there any strategies that you used at your early stages in business, but even nowadays, like what kind of tactics, or what are the ways in which you make sure that you're one step ahead of your competition? How do you make sure that you don't fall behind, but instead you actually go beyond and deliver even more to your customers?
I think one of the things which I really do as a business is that I'm involved from everything. And I know that there will come a time where you have to kind of like allow people to, they do take charge, but I'm still involved in the sense is I really love when I see pharmacies and companies who have my products, and I actually go and visit them, and I'll either sometimes deliver the products, and I'll have a conversation with the store manager, the team members, and I always allow them to use my product, because one of the best things which I love is when I have consumers who have used it and they come back and they give me that feedback, because I'd rather have real consumers than having individuals where you just basically give them freebies and they never use your products. So I feel like really being hands-on with your company allows individuals to really resonate with you, because it's all fair and games that anyone can actually do a nutritional supplement, anyone can formulate a nutritional supplement, anyone can found one, but it's really difficult to find someone who's as hands-on involved and actually goes beyond with their company and actually believes in it, and that company basically is a vision of you. And that's what I've tried to do from the beginning. And when I launched the company, I remember, because I worked with all these big companies and I ended up being the face where I went and educated on the companies. But one of the issues was it wasn't my company. So when they would ask me a question, for example, where does vitamin B12 originate from? I would have to go to the XYZ individual in that company in order to get that information, which would take up to 2 months. Whereas if someone asks me, where's your vitamin B12 and is it a methylated form, I know the exact origin to it and I can answer it on the spot. And I think that's really different. In terms of strategy, my strategy of anything to do with my business went out the window. And I literally, and I'm being I'm being dead serious here, I winged it through the whole 2 years. I played it as I could because of the pandemic. But now there's more of a strategic approach to it, because obviously there's certain elements of the business where there's a strategy in place to help grow B2B, help grow B2C, where you invest in marketing and where you invest in social media. And there's obviously marketing consultants who come on board. And I've really listened to individuals, because I'm a nutritionist. And yes, I founded the company, but there are individuals out there who are way smarter than me and have more knowledge and expertise in, say, Google Ads, SEO, or marketing and certain things like that. So I think being hands-on is really, it's a good strategy to have in a business, but also allowing others to have their input and just seeing them grow the brand as well. I've had the strategy side. I'm being serious. I'm going back to that. I had to get rid of it because the pandemic changed everything to do with any strategy that I even visioned of having.
Wow. It does seem like you have quite some determination to just, see how things go, go with the flow instead of just sticking to a playbook necessarily. And I feel like that's quite an important point to make. Most of us at our youth, including myself, we have plenty of ideas, for sure, that could easily be £1 million ideas, perhaps even £1 billion ideas, as crazy as they might be. But it's just that lack of confidence. Oh, but I don't know how to write a business plan. Oh, but what if another variant pops up and there's another lockdown? So there's a lot of limiting beliefs, perhaps, that I feel like you've tackled just by saying that, you know what, I just winged it. And
Yeah.
that's quite fascinating for sure. And you also did touch a little bit on specific components such as vitamin B12. Of course, most of us know about some terminology, but at the same time, we're not necessarily aware of the actual science or like what's behind that sort of supplement. How does that actually give us the results that we want? So I'd like to know a bit more about Life Roots and its product range. How does it add value to your customers? Like, what's so special about it? And you feel free to use a bit of scientific jargon as well.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure our audience would appreciate that.
No, so to be fair, that's a very good question, because it's something which I do sometimes feel for the general public or the average consumer, because everyone is the average consumer. If I didn't have the nutritional knowledge and expertise more than anything, then I would be the average consumer when I would buy supplements. And it's quite difficult because you go into, like, for example, you'll go into Sainsbury's, you'll go into Waitrose, you'll go into Whole Foods, and you'll go into like more prestige places like Selfridges, John Bell and Croydon, and you have these supplements, right? And they all, for the average consumer, they all look the same, but they have no idea why they're different. And when I founded Life Roots, my vision was always to use botanicals, which just basically means it's grown, it's food grown. And my vision to why I would use botanicals is, honestly, there is science to say that it may be beneficial, but there's science only goes as far as today, and then tomorrow they prove it incorrect. So there is science to say, obviously, you should be consuming this certain micronutrient. Like, for example, we were told how many years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, by the World Health Organization, that we should be consuming vitamin D throughout the winter months due to the lack of sunshine, which has been known ever since we've known about vitamin D, right? But then we're not told about the different forms of vitamin D and why this form may be better for this individual and why this form may be better for this individual. And with Life Roots, I wanted to be very transparent. So everything that I have in the in one capsule is on the capsule. So there's no sort of it's 100% transparency. The ingredients themselves. So, for example, with the B vitamins, I went for the methylated form, which basically just means for the average consumer, it's more easily absorbed. And that's as simple science as you can get. Not saying that an unmethylated form is not superior to it, but science states that the methylated form is better to be used. And I made sure that the vitamin D3 was from a company in the UK called VitaShine, which is an algae-based vitamin D3, because vegans can consume that, as opposed to using lanolin, which is basically sheep's wool, because vegans cannot consume that. So I ensured that all my ingredients were food-based, and they could be consumed by every single individual. So there's nothing there it's a vegan product basically, so it's plant-based. My vision to why I would stick out was, looking at a lot of supplements, it's always like 2 capsules, 3 capsules a day. I wanted 1 capsule a day, because I know personally, as a nutritionist, I will consume 1 capsule a day. The moment it goes 2 to 3 to 4, life takes over. Like, unless you start popping tablets or pills or supplements, it's quite difficult to take all your supplements at once. So I wanted to ensure that it's 1 capsule a day, 1 dissolvable capsule a day, because the actual shell is made from vegetable polylan, which is basically just a food-based shell. And you can actually put it in water, obviously use a spoon, and within 30 seconds, it will dissolve. I wouldn't usually recommend that. The reason why is, when you use food state micronutrients, certain nutrients like selenium and zinc can give off quite a bitter taste. So I would usually recommend to consume the capsule as it is, as opposed to using that. But that's one of the kind of like, one of the points of making Life Roots was I wanted it to be 1 capsule a day, vegan based, food based, the whole packaging to be consumer friendly, world friendly. So it's a sustainable brand. And then every single product which is sold, I ensure that a tree is planted in order to help keep the world as sustainable as we can. And the whole range that we have right now, it's kind of like we have multis for the whole family. So you've got men's, women's multi. But the reason why there can't be a multi for both genders is specifically women will need more of iron, for example, for different purposes, such as how they're created as women. And then men may need less of it for obviously different purposes. And men may require more selenium for prostate health and certain different purposes of male health. And then we've got the kids multi, which is in the smallest capsule that you can think of. I don't have one with me, but it's literally like a centimeter. And the reason why I didn't go for gummies or anything like that is because I didn't want to add any sugar to it. And it can be consumed after the age of, I say 5 years old, because some kids tend to be more picky than others, but it can be consumed after the age of 3, providing that a parent pays attention, because it's literally a centimeter in terms of size. The two hero products which I formulated have to be Relaxease, which is a product which is for stress-related issues. Stress is a big issue in the world. We all have stress. I have stress every day. I deal with it every single day. But that specific product was formulated, and prior to launching, I asked 50 participants to take part, who were not on any antidepressants or anything like that, which may obviously contradict with the actual product itself. And I remember getting the feedback from 50 participants, and 49 out of 50 said that they felt better using Relaxease. And I knew when I formulated that product, I was like, this is going to be a hero product, because I didn't know the pandemic was going to hit. Because then when the pandemic hit, that became a hero product, because everyone wanted to buy that. But I remember formulating that product just based on previous experiences and knowing how stressful life can be, and then testing it before it hit the market. And then even once it hit the market, it's been one of our best sellers. And then we've got a cognitive support, which is used for it's basically for brain health, to help your cognitive health. That has quite a potent antioxidant rich base. Antioxidants help with obviously brain health and protecting us against such free radicals and so on. And then there's a range of digestive supplements for the whole family. One of the key products is called Family Biome, which basically means it's a digestive live bacteria, probiotic, but you can't legally state probiotic on the actual supplement because of food regulations. But that product itself is suitable from the age of 2, because it's in a capsule. You can just basically open it up, put it in a tiny bit of water, and down it as it is. And then you've got obviously different supplementations for different purposes, because I won't bore you because it can be really boring. Then you've got a menopause support. And the last one, I actually formulated that during the pandemic, an immune support. But that was key during the pandemic, because everyone wanted something to do with their immune. But now that the pandemic we still have COVID, of course, but it's not as popular as it used to be, because people are basically supplementing with multis as opposed to going for a specific immune support.
Clearly you've thought about everyone, and you've made sure that everything is clear. So in terms of having certain nutrients that are more valuable to male than female consumers, I think that's quite important to have, and it does seem to be quite standard practice in the nutrition industry. But of course, I'm more than convinced that there are very effective measures taken in place with live roots to make sure that, as you mentioned earlier, the ingredients are organic, and of course that they can be consumed by vegan customers, and that's critical. I feel that the audience would benefit from understanding that a business only makes that leap into, let's say, that top 1% within an industry if it makes sure that certain aspects are, let's say, addressed that the mainstream doesn't necessarily cover. And of course, this is applicable anywhere. I'm certain that someone with an idea to come up with an improvement to what already is out there in terms of electronics or whatever someone's passion is, it's all about making sure that you go the extra mile, and certainly Life Roots has in this case. So this brings me to the very final question, which is planned, and it's a question that we tend to ask to all of our guests. What advice would you offer to a young audience that might have plenty of business ideas, as pretty much all of us might have, and yet are not confident about how to explore them? how do you condense that sort of expertise and knowledge that you have throughout your journey as an entrepreneur, but also as a professional, in a few tips, perhaps?
I would say, if I always address this question with, if I could go back and tell my young self, what would I tell young Egzona? I would say, don't fear taking the leap because of financial difficulties or not being supported by family members or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, I always believe you only have one life. And if you have a vision, if you have ideas, that simple idea, which might seem silly to 1,000 people, but it makes sense to one, might be the next $1 billion idea, and it might make you this individual who you'd never dream of being. And I feel like fear is allowed in life, because without fear, we'd bloody attack a lion, for example. But with fear, we know that that lion will attack us. So let's not do that. But in a sense, is that I feel like taking the leap and having, even if you don't have a supporting family or a supporting circle of friends, if you support yourself, that's enough for you to want to achieve. And if you have an idea, make a note of it, because I've got all my childhood ideas. Some of them are so silly, but I look at them and I'm like, I was a very unique child. I don't just listen to my parents. Exactly. But no, there's some ideas I'm just like, maybe they won't work out, but maybe in the future. But my parents always say you were unique in how you thought of things. But it was because I was very vocal growing up. And it's something with, for example, like in our culture, or as you know, in the Albanian culture, usually we're told not to be super, super vocal. Whereas I was the opposite. And my parents were like, be vocal, because you've got a voice, make it heard and do it. But I would say always write down any idea that you have, and especially ideas at nighttime, because some of the best ideas come to me at like 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm wide awake and my brain is racing. But don't be scared of going for those ideas, because especially in westernized countries, but even in non-westernized country, there's so much opportunities, and you can literally grow your business from a simple laptop. So I was born in the 1990s, right? So early 1990s. We didn't have, my early 20s were not, I couldn't carry my laptop and try and, or a MacBook, which weighs what, about 2 kilograms max. I couldn't carry it everywhere. I had a Microsoft Dell or whatever, and they weighed a lot, and you could not carry them everywhere. Whereas now you've got a piece of technology which you can literally start any business from. So the accessibility to founding, to starting a business is so easy compared to what it used to be. For example, sometimes I'll have random ideas of doing a business in, I don't know, something to do with e-commerce. I go on Shopify and I've got my web developer and we start it. And it's literally just an extra business, because if I've got an idea, I do it. And the money which you need for that is minimum. So do not be scared because of the costs involved, because to start a business in today's day and age, there's not a lot of cost involved, but the profit will be bigger because you know you've done it. And even if you fail, you can fail once, you can fail twice, you can fail even 50 times. You might win the 50th first, so the 51st time. So I would always say, do not be scared, and do not feel like being an entrepreneur is a gender-based community, because it's not. A lot of women are entrepreneurs, and I know that may have not been the norm 50, 60 years ago, but there's a lot of women who are entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of men who are entrepreneurs, but you always help each other. And even though it's a big network, people do help each other in small business and for small, medium businesses. They always help one another. So I would say, even though there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of what ifs, there's a lot of buts, there might be the thing of, especially within our culture, and I say this, we're usually told to finish a degree and do a degree, and obviously study a bachelor's or master's or anything like that. I did a bachelor's, I did a master's, and would I tell my child to just do a degree and just focus on degree? No, I'd probably educate my child on business first, because it's something which we are not taught from a young age. We are not taught about business, about achieving something through becoming an entrepreneur. We're not taught about some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, where we just hear about them from social media now, or going on Google. And I would always teach my child about business and about not fearing business. And if they want to do a degree, that's perfect. But if they do not, I would never inflict it, because honestly, a degree helps, but I've got 2 degrees and I've learned more in my last decade of working as a nutritionist, so my practical work, than I did during my degrees. But obviously, as nutritionists, you need degrees. So I need a degree in order to be a registered nutritionist and to be registered with the association. But if I didn't need it, and if my child wanted to be a nutritionist and they didn't need the degree, I would definitely not tell them to do it. But I would say it just goes, I would say if you believe in yourself, do it. And that's as simple as it is. That people might say, oh, the what ifs. Don't listen to the what ifs, because your what ifs will prevent you from even driving the car. Because it's like, what if I crash? What if I do this? You will not do anything in life. Just do it and believe in yourself.
Egzona, this has been insightful to say the least. And thank you so much for all the pearls of wisdom. And it's certainly something that it's quite crucial, of course, to talk about success stories like this, so that we can all gain some inspiration from that success that you've earned, and so much hard working has gone behind that. So thank you so much for your time, and all the best for any future ventures within Life Roots or beyond.
No, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully I've inspired a lot of people, especially within our community, and especially future women entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Hopefully they take that leap to do it. But also, I do want to always stress, I always have my business social media platform on Instagram that anyone can direct message me or drop me a call on Life Roots. They'll always connect it to my number if they ever have any questions, because I think
LinkedIn,
it's important to always help. And LinkedIn
Yeah.
is amazing, but I just get a lot of marketing things on LinkedIn so that I miss personal messages. But I would say I can always put my email address. I would say email is amazing because I do reply.
Sure. And yeah, if you have any questions for Egzona, yeah, either reach Egzona directly, or perhaps even add a question on our YouTube channel, but also on Spotify. Recently, there's a new feature where you could pop up your question there, and I'm sure that Egzona will be more than happy to respond.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Thank you so much once again, Egzona.
No, thank you for having me, and have a great day, because the sun is shining today, even though it's cold.
Yeah, for once.
I
Thank
know,
you.
right? Thank you.